What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I've got another great video for you today. But before we get into the introduction, I hope that everybody will like this video and give it a thumbs up, because that's how the word gets out to YouTube that there is new content. Also, make sure you ring the notification bell in your subscription settings to all notifications so that you get notifications about any new videos that we produce. We've got a great interview coming up for you today. Marilyn Tucci, who has a great story to tell and a lot of great information to pass along. So I'm going to be turning the floor over to hear her shortly. So let me bring her in and we'll be back. So we are back now, and I have Marilyn with me, and I'm going to turn the floor over to her. So Marilyn, I know you have a good story to share and a lot of information to pass along. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm just going to share a little bit about myself. I was born with congenital cataracts, which are not operable. And then when I was a little older, and I'm not sure what age I was because I was pretty young, maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, my parents were told that I had macular degeneration, which was unheard of in a child at that time. They called that an old person's disease. So my parents were very upset because they wondered, how did she get an old person's disease when she's a child? So also back in those days, there was no such thing as wet or dry macula. So things have progressed as the years have gone by. Unfortunately, there's still no cures for me and nothing they can do with my eyes. I go to an eye doctor every couple of years in hopes that, technology will, have something, but so far, no. So I went to a regular public school. I was mainstreamed, which the school didn't want. They felt that blind children and other children with disabilities should go to special schools. And my parents had asked me, do I want to go to a special school? And I said, no, I want to go to regular school with the other kids. So that's what, we did. I went to regular school, and my parents were very supportive. They read things to me. They took me places. They taught me things. I went to museums. I went to see live plays. I went to movies. I was treated just like any other child was. And I was explained things. So I knew, what everything was around me. You go into a museum, you go see a painting, but you're not allowed to touch the painting. And it was described to me. You go into the Museum of, I think it's Natural History with dinosaurs, that was described to me. So I grew up having some culture, because not all blind people get that. A lot of people have this fallacy that, well, if you can't see, why should we bring you here? Or why should we tell you this? But it has nothing really to do with your vision. It has to do with your personality. If you want to learn something, if you want to know something, and if you want to be part of society. I learned Braille, and I used to Braille everything, but I always wanted to learn how to write. And when I was in elementary school, and I also attended the industrial home for the blind. And when I was in elementary school, there was a teacher, when I used to raise my hand, she would ask questions and then pick on students, and she would never pick on me to answer any of the questions. So as a child, you don't know the word frustrated, but I was getting, as I put it, mad, because she would never call on me and I would raise my hand. And then finally, I just started having what she called outbursts, and I would yell out the answer. And every time I yelled out the answers, I was correct. She would pick kids that didn't know the answer, and my hand was still raised and would never call on me. So they sent a letter home to my parents, and my mother had gone up to school because my parents took turns. Who's going up this time? Okay, your turn. And they both worked. And now I feel bad as an adult that they both had to take off from work, but it was never really my fault, because I just felt like the teachers didn't pay attention to me. And you sit in the back of the room, and that was it. So when my mother came up to have a meeting with the principal, the dean, the assistant principal, and some other people, a psychologist, my mother had asked me before we went, why were you, yelling out the answers? And I said, because I'm mad at her that she never calls on me and I know the answer. So I said, she calls on other kids who don't know the answer. So my mother brought that up, and the teacher, of course, was in the room. There was an aide in the classroom, and I was sitting in the hallway. They gave me a chair to sit on, and an aide was standing there with me. And then they called me in the room, and they had asked me a few questions, and they didn't tell me what they discussed, but my mother told me the reason the teacher never calls on you is because she didn't think you know the answers, because my mother used to use the word visually impaired. So that changed, because once the teacher realized that I did know the answers and that she should call on me once in a while when I raised my hand, things got a lot better in the classroom for me. And as I got older, I always wanted to learn how to write. So I used to scribble. And then I had one teacher that asked me when I was in high school, he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing. And he said, no, you're doing like scribble scrabble. He said, would you like to learn? I said, I would. So he said, you come in an hour early every day and I will teach you. So he made up a template and he taught me how to write. And to this day I can write. Unfortunately, I can't read it back to myself because nobody's invented something to read handwriting. So hopefully in the future that could happen. But from what I hear today is people aren't writing anymore. Everything is technology, which is very
all
sad.
electronic. So
yes, everything is electronics. So fast forwarding, I got married. I had 4 children. And I traveled a bit. My husband was in the military. I attended college for a year because moving around was kind of hard. And then I was living in Alabama and trying to get services, but because I was in what I would call the boonies out there, they didn't provide services. And I also lived in Hawaii, and Hawaii also, because I was in the military, did not provide services, and they considered us transients. Like you could be here 6 months, you could be here a year, you could, be gone in 2 years. So it was a little hard, but the best place that I lived was in Hawaii because I had wonderful neighbors who were very helpful. And my second child was born in Hawaii. So that was a thrill for me to go to Hawaii and live there for 14 months. And I learned a lot being there. And I had traveled there with my son, who was a baby, my oldest, by myself. And I went to California. I toured California with the aid of a taxi driver. And it was a good experience for me. People say to me, how could you do that by yourself and with a baby? And I said, because I wanted to experience California. I figured I'll never be back there again, so it was my opportunity to spend 4 days there, travel around and go see different parts of California. So that's what I did. And, traveling was a lot. I didn't sleep much because I had a baby, and we didn't have any of the technology for children that we do today either. So it was very hard on me, carrying diaper bags, a cane, and an infant. But I did it. I survived. My son survived. So, fast forward, when my husband got out of the military, we moved back to New York, which is where I live now. And I had 2 more children. We had a house, which I still live in. And people say to me, how could you manage a house and 4 children? I have 2 children and I can't even take care of them. And I said, for me, it wasn't a big deal. You're adding 2 more to the 2 more you have. It's all the same, and it was hard on my kids. I didn't realize growing up because I wasn't the mother that could drive and take them places. They had to go on public transportation with me. And wherever I lived, I made sure that I had public transportation or I wouldn't move there. So where I live is very convenient because I'm near a train that I could walk to. I'm near a bus stop that I can walk to. It's a few blocks. Of course, where I live is very limited, but it still got me and my children out of the house. So I also joined a lot of things, and I put my children in a lot of activities like Boy Scouts. I tried to join the PTA. They weren't very friendly to me at the beginning. Some people are not comfortable around blind people, or for that matter, people with any disability. And some are comfortable and will befriend you. So that's also another issue, because I've had people say, when I said, can I take your arm? Can you guide me? And they said, oh no, I never touched a blind person before. And that kind of threw me, because I said blindness isn't catching. You're not going to get it. I also wear a hearing aid in one ear. And sometimes I do have difficulty hearing, but most of the time, you know, I can hear what I need to hear. And I also have a guide dog. Back in the 80s, I decided as my kids got older, I didn't want to rely on them for help. So I had to become even more independent than I was. So I decided to get a guide dog. And I've been using guide dogs for about 34 years. That is the best thing I ever did for myself. It enhanced my mobility. It gave me even more confidence. And I was always a confident person, but I noticed the cane slows you up when you have to walk. And the dog can find doors for you, steps for you where the cane can't. So a lot of times people that use canes have to rely on sighted help. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be more independent and rely on the dog to guide me. And not to say that there are times even with the dog that you don't need help, because you do, especially if it's a place you're going to and you've never been there before, because you can't give the dog the command, find the door or find the room or find this, because the dog's never been there. Once the dog is there, you teach them, and you teach them by patting whatever it is you want. Find the door in, find the door out. You know, so the dogs are really a wonderful mobility tool. And hopefully I will never have to go back to a cane, but that's just me. Not everybody, you know, likes dogs or wants a dog. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's worth it to me anyway. Let's see, I've had quite a few jobs. And before, I want to talk about a little bit about the ADA. Before the ADA, we had no rights. People with disabilities fought every inch just to be treated a little bit equally, because we're never going to be treated 100% equal because of our disability. But there were places that I realized once I got the dog that I couldn't go. And one of them was a Chinese restaurant. I went with a couple of friends, and this is before the ADA. And my one friend held the door, and we had to go through 2 doors to get in this Chinese restaurant. And when I went to walk in through the first door and I was in front of my friends, I opened the second door and was holding it. And the next thing I knew, this man came out and pushed me and shoved me, where I lost my balance, but I didn't fall. I had the door in my hand, and it pushed my dog also. And he says, no dogs allowed, no dogs allowed. So I said, this is a guide dog. No, no dogs allowed. So my friends were yelling at him, first of all, for touching me, which he shouldn't have done, and for refusing to serve me because I had a guide dog. I tried to explain, but he would not hear it. So my friend called the police, and we didn't even have cell phones back then. My friend called the police. We waited. Of course, it took a long time for the police to come. We knew it wasn't an emergency. And the police officer said, well, they have the right to refuse you. You know, if he doesn't want you there, go eat somewhere else. And I said, but a lot of places refuse me because of the dog, and that's not right. So fast forward to the ADA. Now I can go into any restaurant, and if they do give me a problem because of the dog, I have the right to try to mediate with them or take them to court and sue them, because it is against the law to discriminate against somebody with a guide dog. Guide dogs are welcome under the ADA in any public place. Now, a private facility does have the right to deny you because it's private. So there's not much you could do about that, including some churches. They have the right to say, you know, we don't want you here with the dog. but that's far and few between because most churches do accept you and synagogues also. My work history, I'm going to share a story with you about a job that I went on. And I didn't tell this man that I had a guide dog. So he liked my resume, called me in for an interview, and I had asked the receptionist, how do I find your building? And she was giving me directions for driving a car. So I said, no, I'm taking a bus. So that was like, that threw them off because, most people drive. So she gave me directions the best she knew. She said, it's kind of hard for me because we all drive. So I don't know how to get here with a bus. But I called up the bus company and I figured everything out. And it was a line bus. And I took 2 of them to get there. And I finally found the place, even though I was lost a little bit on a major highway. But somebody finally did help me and, showed me where the building was. And I get in the building and I could hear in the receptionist's voice like she was shocked, because she saw a blind woman coming in with a dog. Now I go for the interview, and the first thing the man says to me was, what if people here are allergic to the dog? So I said, I'm allergic. I carry Benadryl. I'll be happy to share my Benadryl with anybody. He got annoyed with that comment. And then he said, what if your dog has fleas? He said, people will have fleas jumping on him. I said, well, my dog is on preventative, but if you were to get fleas, I said, I will be happy at night to bomb the place and it will be fine in the morning. Now I knew he was getting even madder. And then he said, we dress with nice clothes here, so, and by the way, I thought I was dressed pretty nice too. So he said, your dog is going to, shed fur and I said, that's okay. So I opened my pocketbook, I pulled out my lint brush and I said, I carry a lint brush. I'll be happy to share my lint brush with my coworkers. So for every negative he was giving me, I gave him a positive. I knew I wasn't going to get the job. And it was just based on because I had a guide dog, but also it could have been based on the fact that I was blind. And, you don't have to tell anybody that you are blind. I had an incident also with another company when I went for a job. I was already working, but I decided I needed to change of jobs. And I had my case open with the Commission of the Blind, and they sent a job placement specialist to help me. And he found something. I called up about the interview, and it was in town that was only 1 bus ride away. So it was perfect for me since I already worked in the town and knew people. So I go in for the interview. I called up and the man says to me, you can, just walk in anywhere from 9 to 5. So I said, all right, I will be there about 3:30 tomorrow. So I go in there with my job placement specialist. He picks me up at work and he had a copy of my resume. They gave him an application. But as soon as I walked in there, I could feel some of the people that work there staring at me. You just get that feeling. So we sat down and I said to the person, are there people staring? He goes, yep, but just ignore it. They're just looking at you and the dog. So now the woman takes the application and she goes into the back room and we're still sitting there. There was one woman interviewed before me. There was nobody after me. The man comes out. He can see me sitting there down the hall. And he said to the woman, get rid of her and that dog now. And I'm grabbing the person, the job placement specialist. Like I grab him and I'm like squeezing his hand. He goes, I heard it, Marilyn. Just please don't say anything. So she comes over and she goes, and we heard him a second time saying, get rid of her and that dog right now. So after the second time, I was becoming really infuriated. I wanted to say something to him because the law says you have to interview me. You don't have to hire me. So with this, my coworkers where I worked asked me, how it went. And I said it didn't because I couldn't even get an interview with this person. And my one friend there said, you know what, Marilyn, you got to do something because people have been discriminating for years against you and other blind people. We hear stories all the time. So her boyfriend worked for a lawyer and he was a paralegal, and he called me and he gave me the phone number to the Human Rights Commission. I called them and they sent me paperwork. My husband filled it out and we sent it back. And then I get a phone call from them that my case wasn't big enough and they were on this big case. And I don't know if it was a Gulf Oil or Exxon, some kind of oil thing that they were on for discrimination. And she said to me, well, why don't you just go to a lawyer? And I said, no. I said, that's what you're here for, to fight for my rights, and you're not representing my rights. So I guess now you leave me no alternative but to go to a lawyer, because now I have to sue you and this other place for discriminating against me. And she was so shocked that I said that. And she said to me, well, why didn't you tell them that you were blind? I said, because I don't have to. I said, if somebody likes your resume and they're willing to meet with you, you know, he shouldn't judge my appearance or my guide dog. He should judge me on my work history and what my abilities are. So with that, the next day I get a registered letter that I have a hearing the following week. And the place that, you know, denied me the interview, they sent the lawyer there, cost them money. Now, because my case was open under Helen Keller Services for the Blind, because it used to be the IHB, now it's the Helen Keller Services, they asked me to back off and not to make any waves. And I told them no. I said, there's an old saying, you can only turn your cheek, you know, so many times, and I've turned it twice already. There's no cheeks left to turn. So they said, please, you know, you don't want to work for them. I said, no, I don't. But I want to make it better for the next person with a disability that might want to work there. So I went forward with the hearing and I was representing myself. And when I got into the building with my husband, this husband and wife came over to me and they go, are you Marilyn? And I said, yes. And they go, we're your lawyers. We're here to represent you. So now I know why Helen Keller wanted me to back off, because it cost them a lot of money to send two lawyers, a husband and wife team from another county to represent me. But they never told me that. So because my case was open, they had to protect my rights. But as I said, I was never told that. So I went in there and they asked me, the lawyers, what do you want monetarily? And I said, this isn't about the money. Money helps, but it's not about the money. I said, it's about the principle and the way I was treated. So I said, I want a letter of apology. And I said, and I want a sign hanging that they do and will interview people with disabilities. So we go inside and, you know, long story short, I won. And the lawyers kept asking me what I wanted monetarily. And I kept saying, this isn't about money. And the lawyers kept saying, no, you got to hit them in the pocketbook to teach them a lesson. You got to say something. So I said, let me go out and talk to my husband, because he wasn't allowed in the room. So I went out and my husband said, you're smart. He said, whatever you decide, I back you. You know, I could have asked for $100,000 and I probably would have got something, because it was discrimination. So what I said was, I want $500. I lost a day's pay. I said gas for my husband's car and lunch. The following week, I got $500 and I was satisfied. A week after that, my husband and I walked in that store and there was a sign hanging and I did get my apology letter. So it taught me that you have to advocate and you can't back off. You know, if you think you're right, even if other people don't want to back you or they think you're wrong, you got to advocate for yourself, because nobody else is.
Did you have any struggles with advocacy after that? And that kind of leads me up to my next question, because you're talking about employment, but did you have any struggles with advocacy after any of this, after the ADA, you know, was put in place? And also tell us about some of the advocacy work that you're currently doing and how has that benefited you as a person with a disability?
Okay. I work for an independent living center, and what we do is we advocate for people with all disabilities. And I've done many system changes over the years. um, like, I'll give you an example. I'm very big into transportation in my county because we lack a lot of transportation. Where if you go into the city, buses run like every 20 minutes, 15 minutes, trains going constantly. You don't have the problems getting around like you do in a suburb. So one of the system changes that I've made was some years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago, the county, they purchased the buses, and we have a private vendor. So they've been on contracts, and the bus company itself is a decent company, but their hands are tied because of the county. The county tells them what to do, when to do it, and they buy the buses. And they do not include people with disabilities when they purchase a paratransit. Now, the line buses, I've never really had a problem, but years ago I did, because that's what I used to take to work all the time. And there were no bus stops years ago out here. And they used to have, back in the 60s and 70s, a school bus. Now, how does a blind person distinguish what school bus is really taking you into a town that you want to go to? So my husband made a sign for me, and it's folded up in my pocketbook, and I would hold it, and in big red letters, it says bus. But of course, after a while, you're holding the sign up, your hand gets tired. So I kept asking, why can't you put up signs that say bus stop? Finally, after years, they did. So people know where the bus stops are. And they said, well, any corner is a bus stop. You just got to raise your hand and flag them down. And I said, but you're not understanding. Blind people can't do that because we can't see. There could be 20 school buses, and even a regular bus we don't see. You could hear it because their engine is a lot bigger. So the county had bought these buses they call the 1400s, and they were very narrow, and they didn't have a lot of weight to them because in a big wind, you could feel that bus being tossed on a highway. It's a little scary. So the first time I got on this bus, I noticed that there was a difference. And on one side of the bus, there was a single seat, which meant I could not sit there with my guide dog, because the guide dog cannot sit in an aisle for safety reasons. So they have to sit in front of your seat. Well, because there was a single seat, that meant my dog was going to be in the aisle. So those seats were out. So the other seat behind the driver didn't have leg room, and it was a double seat. So I said to the driver, my dog and I can't fit together. I said, and she can't even fit, if I took her harness, it would be a tight squeeze for her to get in. So the driver says, well, I don't know what to tell you, if you want to wait for another bus. I said, no, because that means I could wait here for another hour or two, and I'd like to go home from work. So it was the wrong move on my part, but I didn't know it. So the dog was in the aisle, and because there was no traction on the floor, the dog was like sliding all over the place. And the driver saw it, and I said, driver, can you please go slower? My dog is sliding everywhere. And he said, I'm doing the speed limit, and I can't go any slower. Well, when I got off the bus, the driver said to me, I think your dog is limping. And I said, okay, so I didn't think much of it. I thought, well, maybe she just, hurt her leg from sliding, and she was banging into things. And I tried to hold her as well as best I could. Next time I get on the same bus, and now my dog, her leg is up in the air, and she couldn't even put the leg down. And I said something to the driver. He said, do you want me to call it in? And I said, no, I'm going in my house right now to call the bus company. So I called them up. I said, foil the video. I said, my dog was hurt. I had to go to my vet. My vet said she had 2 ACL tears, but one was really severe, and they can only operate on one leg at a time. So then I went to the Guide Dog Foundation's vet, and they told me the same thing. And they said, yeah, she needs surgery. Meanwhile, the bus company did foil the video. They all saw it. So this way, thank God for videos, because they could have said, you're lying, this happened somewhere else. But they saw what happened to the dog. She went on there, she was fine. She came off limping, and they saw her being tossed around like a little rag doll. So now that meant that I had to advocate to either get rid of these buses or to do a change on these buses. So we called in the manufacturer, the county representatives, the bus company, some politicians came, and it was the day my dog was going into the city for surgery because I couldn't afford. Each leg would have cost me close to $5,000. So we're talking $10,000 that I didn't have.
That's
To pay,
expensive too.
yes, to pay for her surgery. But AMC in New York City does it for free. They were left an endowment only for guide dogs. So it was also, the dog couldn't walk. So how do I get in there? I had to find somebody with a car to take me. Not everybody wants to drive in New York City. So one of my friends said, I'm off on this day, I could take you. So I had an appointment for my dog, but before I went in there, I went to my agency where they brought in the bus and everybody could see, and I showed them every floor on that bus, including the problem with the headers, people hitting their heads, people losing their balance because the floors had no traction on them, the seats. So the outcome was that because of me advocating and the manufacturers of the bus kept saying, this is ADA compliant. I said, no, it's not. I just showed you about 6 or 7 problems with this bus. It is not. You could tell me whatever you want on schematics, but to me, I'm the person that's sitting on this bus with the disability and my guide dog. And the fact that she got hurt twice tells me this is not ADA compliant, this bus. So the outcome was they had retrofitted the whole bus. They took one seat out of the double seats and they moved the seats back. So now you had more leg room. They redid all the floors on the buses. So now when you got on, there was some traction. They moved the headers because not only when you came in the front of the bus, if you could walk on it, but people with walkers were told to duck their heads or their head was going to hit the header. If you were in a wheelchair, you were safe. And then I came to find out that if you're more than like 5'3", you are going to hit the headers and maybe get a bloody forehead, because some people did get bumps and bloody foreheads because they didn't realize. And some of the drivers even had to like duck their head. And if you forgot, you were getting a bump on your head. So that was one of the things that I did to change things. I also advocated for mats for guide dogs to be put on the buses for safety. And I explained to the bus company why the first 2 seats with this little half a wall, blind people with guide dogs should sit in if possible, because it's a safety factor. If the bus stops short, they're on the mat now. They're not going to go flying. And also that wall prevents them. And my feet, you know, sitting in the seat behind the dog is going to prevent them from getting hurt at all. So, and they agreed, and the bus company was really wonderful. They bought rolls and rolls of this mat. It's not the best mat in the world, but it serves its purpose. And when the mat falls apart, the driver has to request new mats for the dog. And every time people with dogs that come on the bus, you know, most of them use the mat. There are a few that don't, but, you know, that's up to them if they want to use it and keep their dog safe. Some of the other things I've done, which was something that just happened, the county bought new buses called the 2100s, and it was on the road last November. And I got on the bus and was not aware that they put shields because of COVID to protect the drivers. This is what they said. But the shield did not protect anybody. It created more problems, not only for the drivers, but for the passengers. Because the first time I went on the bus, the driver didn't get a chance to tell me there's a shield. And I smacked right into it. My dog did not get on the step because she had to figure out, how do I get on here? There's no room, because the shield took up floor space and it was catty corner. So it came across. So it took away your space to get on the bus. So when I would get on this bus, I learned that I have to angle myself, put my foot on top of the step, and then call the dog, and she has to go in front of me. And I couldn't sit in the seat behind the driver because there again, not enough leg room for me and the dog. So I'd always have to sit on the left side when I entered the bus where there was more leg room for me and the dog. So in December, I contacted the county because I was getting a lot of complaints about these new buses from people, with different disabilities, not just the blind. And I sent an email to the county and I sent an email to the bus company. And I know that the bus company has no say in what the county does. This was the county's doing. And again, people with disabilities were not included before these buses were purchased so we could give input, and neither were the drivers. So I was advocating from December until July. And on July the 22nd, at my agency's ADA celebration, I was told by the bus company and also by some of the legislators that the shields are coming off next week, which was the week before. And the shields are now off the bus. The bus drivers are even thanking me for advocating, because even though they can complain to the union, there's nothing they can do, because again, the county is the one that makes the final decision with the buses. So we're very proud that we won. And the hardest part is now getting people to advocate for the right things. And I'm going to share, I had 3 very loyal advocates with me doing this. Anytime I asked them, they were there. And I know, Chris, you know who they are. Not going to mention their name.
Yeah, I know who they are.
And there was another person that's advocating for the line buses because the county wants to cut, out of 42 buses left, I believe they want to cut like 21 buses, leaving us like with 20 buses, something to that effect.
That's
And they call
ridiculous.
it the reimagined transit. And they're making it better in some areas with the buses, but they're cutting out people who really need the buses. So we're advocating for that. And also we're advocating for a resolution to be passed in this county that people with disabilities will be included before the county purchases buses to give input. So we don't have to keep going through this and advocating every few years for problems that they create. And as far as the shields go, even the driver said it's not protecting us because it wasn't airtight. It also gave a glare to lights from other cars. It created a fog sometimes. And they put yellow tape around it because I was complaining that if you're blind, you can't find where to give the money. So they put yellow tape around. So, quote, blind people could feel the yellow tape and put their hands through the hole there so you could give the driver your money. And I'm saying, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure blind people can't see the tape. And why would you do something like that? So
that makes no sense.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. But those are some of the things that I've advocated for as far as with the buses. I also advocate for them not to do bus cuts in 2016. We were asking them not to cut it. We did press conferences. And the county just doesn't listen. They do what they want and they don't listen to the people. And the whole thing is that, again, we come back to politics. We elect the people to represent us. And you should, when you're hearing from your constituents that we got a major issue here with buses, we got a major issue, they're not listening because somebody higher up in the county tells them, well, we're doing this and we're doing that. They don't use the buses. Some years ago, myself and somebody else sent out an invitation, try my rides. We wanted the legislators to understand and experience a line bus ride with us. And a few of them did show up, not all, and they did see it, but they didn't see too many problems, but they did talk to a few passengers, to hear some of the issues. But when you cut buses, instead of making better routes and better service, you're hurting the people in this county. So what does it tell me? Do you want to get rid of anybody who can't drive to make it harder for you to live here? Because if you can't take a bus somewhere to a doctor, to a store, or to your job, you're cutting people out and you're leaving them no alternative but to move from here. Because if you can't get around, you can't live here. So we're advocating against this latest bus cut. And I was told by legislators, well, you don't know if it's really going to happen. We haven't voted on it yet. And I said, well, I think it's a done deal because you picked a date next July 2023 to do these bus cuts. So to me, you wouldn't have picked a date if you already didn't know you're going to cut many buses. So that's where, we are with them. But that's some of the advocacy I do. I also did some advocacy with CVS Drugs during the pandemic because a person in a wheelchair went through the drive-through and she wanted a test, and it was the month of December, which was very cold. She was a diabetic and she's on dialysis, and they refused to give her the test after she waited in line between the cars. I went on their website and their website said vehicle. I got to run around calling them, the main headquarters in Rhode Island, and I told them, you should have emphasized the word car, vehicle, not vehicle, because that her wheelchair is her vehicle. A bicycle is a vehicle. A scooter is a vehicle. I said there's many vehicles. It doesn't have to be a car, and you didn't emphasize cars only. So they did change that, and they were very nice. They offered her, a free ride anytime. But it took months to, deal with them because they're a big company. And this was just one of many problems that, people with disabilities had with them. And when I said to them, why wasn't she just told to go inside and the pharmacy could give her the COVID test? And we don't know. But, it was dangerous in the parking lot for her in a wheelchair. So I said, and it's also dangerous for any people, even without a disability, walking to their cars. Anybody could get hit by a car, but I said, but she did the right thing. She made an appointment. She went there in her wheelchair in the winter. She waited on a line between cars. And I said, and it was sad that she was turned away. So we advocated, and that was changed, with the drug company.
I guess my next couple of final questions are, what types of what advice would you give someone that either may be having difficulty getting what they need, getting their things advocated for, and what advice would you give someone to be able to be independent? What advice do you have for someone that might be watching this video that might be struggling with dealing with how to become more independent and getting themselves out there?
Well, I think a big part of independence is that you have to be secure in yourself. That's number one. And number two is where you live. Wherever you live, you must be able to use public transportation, walk to stores, walk to banks, and just know your surroundings, what's there for you. Can I go out to eat? Can I walk to a restaurant? Can I walk to the bank? Can I walk to my doctor? How far is my hospital? Where is the nearest bus stop? Where is the nearest train? Are there taxis in this town? So those are things you have to look for before you even look for a place to live. And then comes the hard part, because some people live on a limited income and they have to be supplemented. And it's really tough out there finding affordable housing for people, because many people with disabilities don't have a work history. So they collect SSI and you're so limited. I feel that there should be more housing for people with disabilities on limited income. So the thing is that you have to advocate with your politicians. We go back to politics again, because everything is based on politics in our country. You want affordable housing, you have to advocate. Bills have to be passed. Laws have to be changed. And, your name could be on a waiting list, like where we live in this county. The waiting list for Section 8 housing is like 6-7 years because there's not enough affordable housing. But people have to advocate. And, you can talk to a friend who has a disability. It doesn't even have to be your disability. It could be somebody else. You could be in a wheelchair, mental illness. You could be using a walker. You could have had a stroke. You could have cancer. You could have any disability, but there's strength in numbers. And if you're going to advocate You can advocate on your own, but you always want people to be by your side, advocating with you for something that you need changed. So advocacy is a very big thing, and advocacy is going to be around for years. Never gonna, that's one job that will never go out of business, is advocating for, somebody's rights.
I definitely appreciate you telling your story today. It's been a pleasure to actually listen to you. And although I know you well and have been on various groups with you, it's always a pleasure for me to be able to hear your story and hear the things that you've done. And I hope that the rest of the viewers have definitely enjoyed this particular video. And just one piece of information, if you do enjoy the content that I'm presenting to you today, definitely like and subscribe to this channel. And we as a YouTube audience would like to extend a sincere thank you to Marilyn for taking the time to give us this interview today. Well, we're back with Marilyn once again. I apologize for the technical glitch, and I'm going to give her the opportunity to say a couple of final words.
I want to thank you, Chris. There's a lot more advocacy that I've done that I haven't shared, but I want to thank you very much for inviting me on. And I hope people learn from what I shared about advocacy, because it's very important to advocate for the things that you need in your life to help you. So thank you, Chris, again for having me on.